Today's reading is from Rays of the One Light, Weekly Commentaries on the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita by Swami Kriyananda. This week's subject, Does Satan exist? Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The Bible tells us in chapter 4 of the Gospel of St. Matthew, "Then, after baptism, was Jesus led up of the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil." To most modern minds, this passage seems quaintly obsolete. Psychologists would say, have said in fact, that the temptation of Jesus, if it occurred at all, was purely psychological. They call it a projection of desires lurking in his own subconscious mind. The subconscious plays a strong part, certainly, even if not a unique one, in any testing of the spiritual seeker, testing the spiritual seeker must undergo. The Bhagavad Gita, in dealing with this undeniable reality, quotes Arjuna in the 3rd chapter and then Sri Krishna's reply. "Yet tell me, teacher," said Arjuna, "by what force doth man go to his ill, unwilling, as if one pushed him in that path?" Krishna replied, "Desire it is, passion it is, born of the darkness, which pusheth him, mighty of appetite, sinful, and strong in this, man's enemy." Yet even Krishna describes passion as born of the darkness. The fact is, as Paramahansa Yogananda wrote in the Autobiography of a Yogi, all thoughts vibrate eternally in the cosmos. Thoughts are universally and not individually rooted. A truth cannot be created, but only perceived. Psychology, yes, but psychology attuned to the currents of consciousness that pervade the entire universe, attracted by each of us according to our own personal inclinations. Yogananda, quoted in The Path, said, "I used to think Satan was only a human invention, but now I know and add my testimony to that of others who have lived before me that Satan is a reality. He is a universal conscious force whose sole aim is to keep all beings bound to the wheel of delusion. We should take pains then to attract uplifting currents of universal consciousness and to avoid attracting the negative, which, disease that it is, can affect our thoughts even while it leads us to believe that our thoughts are purely our own. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind."
Good morning. This is the last day of the Spiritual Renewal Week in the Ananda Village. I think some of you have been tuning into that, and they've been live streaming the classes in the morning. Our beloved spiritual directors here at Ananda Seattle have had some talks that they've been doing there that have gone really well, and of course so many others. So it's been a very uplifting week for the people that were there, and I'm sure a lot of those blessings have been spinning off for those of us that are back here holding down the fort. And we certainly welcome them back for next week, for sure. So, and it's interesting how this topic usually comes right about, well, it does come at the same week every year, which is usually the same week as Spiritual Renewal Week. So it's kind of an interesting juxtaposition. But then again, it's actually a really fun topic. And I just wanted to answer that question for you because And I'll answer it this way, and you can just make up your own mind whether you agree or not. But it has to do with two little boys, and they were brothers. And they were walking home one day. Their parents were ahead of them, and they'd just gone to Sunday service and had the church service. And anyway, the little boys were kind of kibitzing with each other. And the younger one asked the older one and said, well, what did you think about that Satan guy that the minister was talking about today? And the older brother said, well, let me think a minute. He said, well, remember when our parents used to tell us about Santa Claus and, about him being real and everything? He said, well, I think that maybe this Satan fellow is probably just our dad. Sorry, dads. What do you think? But isn't it true as a child? We get told these things, and we kind of take them in, and we make them our own, and Santa Claus is real, and somehow the devil is this red person with a pitchfork, and his horns coming out of their head, and we kind of picture some of these things, and but then as we become an adult, we begin to rationalize it, and as the reading said, we get to think, well, that's some psychological thing that must be going on, really, the devil, how is that possible? And, we kind of rationalize it away, and doesn't make a lot of sense to us. Or some people take it very seriously and get really bummed out about it. And anyway, I find it interesting. I just want to read again what a self-realized master says about Satan. Because, again, it is one of these mysteries that we kind of have grown up with, and we try to figure it out. And a self-realized master is a saint, a person who has actualized that consciousness which is God. And so they know. They come from that space of knowing. And I'll read it again because it says so much. Yogananda, who knew, said this about the devil. He said, I used to think Satan was only a human invention, but now I know and add my testimony to that of others who lived before me, that Satan is a reality. He is a universal conscious force whose sole aim is to keep all beings bound to the wheel of delusion. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about this morning. And I brought up this big, thick book here because there's a whole large chapter that answers this question very eloquently, so I'm going to attempt to do my best with it. So we know that God exists, and according to the masters, Satan exists. In other words, Satan, or the conscious force that brings us away from that conscious force, which is love, which is God. And so God created the universe. God did this by sending out a force from his own being. And they say that the first time he did it, he didn't succeed, which is kind of interesting, because he sent out that force of love to create the creation that we now know. And that creation realized that they too were love. And just like likes attract likes, just like a bar of steel will attract iron filings, the like, it won't attract leaves or sticks. And so this love of God that has been sent out from the Creator just simply attracted all of its creation because they knew that they were love and they knew they wanted that love, and so they just all got sucked right back in to the Creator, this great big ball of love. So God said, well, I'm going to do something about this. If I want this creation thing to work, I'm going to make it so that they don't figure it out quite so quickly. So he actually created a conscious force which would pull in the opposite direction. So the force goes outward. And, science is proving that, this universe is just expanding at a continual rate. It just keeps going outward. And which kind of confirms some of these things that the great saints have been telling us. And so this force, which is, we can say it's an energy, You can say it's consciousness. That's really the word that we've been using. It's a conscious force. It's consciousness which God sent out. And as it got further away from that source of God, that love, which is what He is, it coalesced into this material world that we've got. You know, just as steam will come out of the sky somehow and become ice, you know, as the energy gets removed from it, so too that energy, that love from God, as it gets sent out, it coalesces into this material world. And so here we are, beings of light, because within us is that spark. The direct definition, one definition of this divine is that circumference, center everywhere, circumference nowhere. So center, in center of every atom, every ounce of space is that consciousness of God. That's that love, that peace, that joy, which is what God is. And so that center is there within us, and we know it's there, and at some level we're aware, because most of us who are sitting in this room have been seeking probably for many millions of lifetimes, because God has hidden us from Him very clearly by this force, this Satan, this force, this conscious force, which is pulling us to think that, no, you know, this love that we're wanting can be found in this material world. This force is the material desires that keep us bound to this life of reincarnation. And we keep coming back, reincarnating time and time again, so that we can try to figure it out, because we know that it's more than just, you know, the things of life that we seem to really want, that everyone seems to seek. And I don't know about you, but you know, we seek it in trying to get a career that really works for us, trying to get relationships that really work for us, you know, things that will make us happy, living in the right place, all that kind of brings what we think happiness into us. But yet there's that longing that never ever gets satisfied. And that is the force of love pulling us back into God, versus the other force, the material desires, continually pull us out into the world. And it's kind of like a dense fog that we're in, you know. Here in Seattle, we can relate to this. In the valleys, you know, you drive up through Everett, you know, that whole Snohomish Valley will be enveloped in fog sometimes, and you can look down on it and see in this fog down there. And, you know, we're kind of like in this valley of fog, and we're seeking our life in the fog, but that's all we know. And it's only as we start to climb out into higher understandings that we begin to get higher into closer into the light, because the light's just above it. You know, you look at the valley with the fog, the mountains all have beautiful sunlight, it's just down in the fog. So you get on that path that starts to lead you out of that valley or fog, and the fog begins to part. You begin to see the light. You begin to see what's really behind everything that you've been seeking in this material world. And I want to read a few paragraphs from this book, Revelations of Christ. If you ever want to know what the Bible is really saying, this is the book. I couldn't understand the Bible myself until I read this book, because this explains what's going on. So just on this topic, it says, Satan does exist. If you open yourself to him, he will come and will infect you with the disease of evil itself. He comes more readily, moreover, than the divine forces. For Satan is eager to possess human beings, whereas angelic forces, before they'll reveal themselves, want to feel that we really are, in our love for goodness and truth, quite pure and selfless. So do not play with those dark forces. They are real, they exist. They can determine whether you rise toward happiness or fall into wretched misery and despair. Most people don't take sides, but wander distractedly between two, neither particularly good nor particularly bad. Essentially, all that such people do is mark time for yet another reincarnation after death comes to claim them and give them another chance to make good. Of such people, Jesus said, "Let the dead bury the dead." Yogananda used to say, "Here is a line. On one side of it is God, and on the other side is Satan. Neither can influence you until you yourself turn toward the one or the other. Once you allow yourself to turn either way, however, the divine or satanic influence will begin to act upon you consciously. You yourself, in other words, first extend the invitation. God or Satan then comes to you and influences you further in the direction you've already indicated. Above all, therefore, invite goodness into your consciousness. The battle will be half won once you realize that you yourself are not the source of any virtue that you manifest, nor of any delusion, but that you can, if you choose, become an instrument of divine love and bliss in the world." And lots more in this book. So I kind of like to look at it as this line. You know, we've got, and we're on the line, and on one side of us is good. It's God. It's pulling us this one direction. And on the other side is that conscious force, material desire, pulling us in the other direction. And you know, most of the time, and I can actually remember this, when I was just going about life, you know, just going to college and, you know, going about life, thinking about my future and where was I going to live. And, you know, I was just kind of in that space, in the fog of, you know, living my life, not thinking much about what it's all about. And, you know, it's delusion is up and down, you know, it's duality. So first I'm happy and then I'm sad, and then I've got money and then I don't, and then I'm here and then I'm there. It's just the way it is. But there was a time, I always remember, when I was, you know, I was seeking, when I finally moved here to Seattle, and I started to take some classes and stuff on self-help back in the 1970s. That was kind of the thing we did, and the self-help movement. And, you know, in one of those workshops I took, it was up in the mountains, which was very, very profound for me. And I always remember, suddenly, it was like my consciousness just came out of my being, out of my forehead, and I was just suddenly one with everything that was there. One in particular with this high grass that I was walking through. And I just remember the tears of joy, and I thought, this is what I'm here for. I'm here to find God. And I mean, this is such a revolutionary thing for me, because at that particular time I wasn't going to church. I never said God, I didn't pray. I mean, all those things were an awareness that I had, but I hadn't brought it into my life. And yet, you know, I was seeking in the way that I knew how by taking these self-help classes. And then, so in other words, I had finally gotten off the treadmill, you know, the roller coaster of life. I finally started to consciously say, what is life all about? And I did it in the only way I knew how at that time, was taking these classes and stuff. And that was my turning towards the light. I was at that point choosing, and I didn't even know it, except I was doing what felt right. And I think that's probably one of the keys of life is, you know, in our heart there is a knowingness of what's right. It's usually quite subtle, and it's usually always is the hardest thing, the hardest way that we can go. But if we can only follow that thread of rightness, that will take us to where we need to go, so to learn and grow. And it came. It was, you know, I made the choice and I put myself in those places, but it was the divine grace that brought me on the path. I had put out a lot of effort, but I didn't really even know what I was looking for. So how lucky we are now that we know. We have these teachings, we know where we want to go. And with knowing that we have this choice always in our life, and you know, for us, it's just the little things that we're choosing, because we are choosing God. We're here. this is what we've made our life, is to grow closer. And yet, the goal finally, of course, is self-realization. And we're on the path towards that goal, climbing up into the light. But it takes some time, and it's a matter of making the right choices. And when you walk that path, you're never really safe. You can, until you reach that final destination. And so, we have to make these conscious choices all along the way. And thinking just in a mundane way of what happened this week to me, because I'm thinking of this topic in particular, that I decided to take a hike, which is not unusual for me, but the weather was gorgeous, and I hadn't done very many recently, and so I took one that I hadn't done for 35 years, and so I was quite excited to go up to Mount Baker and do this heliotrope ridge hike that I'd done. It gets you right on top of the Coleman Glacier up there. It's quite remarkably beautiful. So, but things were happening in the morning, so I didn't get an early start. Then I got up around 10, and so I beat the traffic. So I was happy. I was feeling really good. It was a beautiful day. I was going to do something that I really like to do. And anyway, I knew it's a long drive where I was going, but that was okay. It gets late. The sun stays out for a long time. So I hit Mount Baker Highway and was tooling along to make a good time. And then I saw these big orange signs, road work ahead, slow down, prepare to stop, and all that stuff, the cones. And sure enough, I hit this pea gravel, and they were chip sealing or whatever. They weren't like tarring, but kind of chip sealing the road. They would lay down the oily stuff, and I put the gravel on top. And so all the traffic was stopped up. And I thought, okay, well, this is fine. It's a beautiful day. I'll just sit here and enjoy. And it doesn't matter, a little, maybe 5 or 10 minutes. Well, 10 minutes went by, 20 minutes went by, 30 minutes went by, and then all the traffic started coming from the other direction. This big line of traffic. They'd held it for a long time. And I thought, well, okay, now we'll go. And we kept waiting and waiting. And there was a choice there, wasn't there? Just think about how many times in our life we react to a circumstance or a situation because it isn't what we wanted or what we thought should happen or whatever. So I had this choice. I could react, and I started to for a minute. I remember thinking, oh, bummer, I'm going to get there late, and all this. And suddenly I remember it just came to me, look, it's beautiful. This is just what is. It's okay. And so I chose at that point to go on the other side of that line. I chose to turn to the light and say, it's okay, God, we're here together. Let's just do this together. I could listen to that beautiful music, those tapes, just sit here and listen. I didn't care. And it just made it so nice. It was an hour and a half. Almost an hour and a half before we got going. So I ended up getting up to the trailhead a lot later, but it didn't matter. It doesn't get dark until 8 o'clock plus. So I had a beautiful hike, and there were some bugs that were a little annoying, but I didn't let those bother me. I just enjoyed everything that I could. And then to top it off, coming back, I've been looking forward to stopping and getting this ice cream cone. I love ice cream cones. And this little town of Glacier, and they have this hard ice cream, and all these wonderful flavors. I was just really looking forward to that. And so I got down there, and sure enough, the store was still open. It was around a little after 7 when I drove in and came in. I said, yeah, I want ice cream. And the lady looked at me, and she said, well, the ice cream bar closes at 7. I missed it by 9 minutes. And I could have gotten bummed and said, well, couldn't you just open it for me, and all that stuff. But I didn't. I just kind of laughed. I thought, oh, Divine Mother, you're a joke again, just playing. But isn't that really what I'm talking about, those little choices? It's that reactive process as we go through life. The more we can live in a sense of consciousness so that we can be on top of what it is that we're doing rather than just go habitually, whatever the habits are, whatever has come up for us. Just let it flow and make those choices that take you into the higher path we're not talking about life or death here. We're talking about, how much of that type of food am I going to eat today because I know it's not good for me. And, maybe just a little less. Make a right choice, a better choice than what the other choice could be. What am I thinking today? Do I have positive thoughts about this person, or has this person bugged me and I'm going to let that rattle on in a negative fashion? That's Satan. There's a story that Yogananda, Swami Kriyananda tells in his book, The New Path. And it's a time when he was living at Mount Washington with Yogananda, and Swami Kriyananda was very young when he moved in. And he said there was a time when he was kind of feeling, he said moody, he was just feeling off, upset. How those things come upon you. And so the master just happened to pass by him and said, "How are you today, Walter?" And it's called him Walter. And Swami looked at him and said, "Well," and before he could say anything else, Yogananda said, "That's good." And he walked off. And Swami said, what happened, of course, was it nipped it in the bud. He wasn't able to get into, I didn't have my tummy hurt, and I didn't eat breakfast. All these things that we can get into. No, he just nipped it in the bud. He said, "That's good." Well, that's not good, but that's good. Feel good. Make it good. Isn't it true? Moods. And what he said about moods, he knew Swami was in a mood. Master said that he suffers. He said he suffers when you have moods, because he said, then I know Satan has got you. So isn't that interesting? How many times do we get in these moods? I can't tell you how often they come upon me sometimes. You get talking about stuff, I'm not good enough, I can't do that. And you kind of get down on yourself. Why can't I have that? That person has it and I don't have it. You get angry, you get depressed. All those feelings that come upon us all the time, those are the times when, Satan's got us. We have made a choice, even though it's not conscious because we're going automatic, we've made the wrong choice. We're crossing over into that other side. And as that force will keep pulling you in that direction as long as you keep choosing and allowing it to go that way. And all I can say is one of our wonderful Kriya Prep people that I got to know when I was teaching the class last spring, he wrote a book because he had pulled himself out of being a drug addict. And his book, about 1,000 Screaming Monkeys, was most revealing in terms of how a normal, fairly wealthy young man, raised in a fairly wealthy family, could start making her own choices, starting in high school. And then those choices kept going from bad to worse. From just some drinking with friends and smoking with friends to harder drugs to very hard drugs, to the point where, totally addicted and totally ruining not only his life but everyone's life around him who were trying to help him, and how he tried to keep getting out. But he'd get out, he'd go to rehab, he'd get clean, but then that's that pull. It's a habit. It's those habits that have been formed, and that habit is so strong that, he goes back to it again. And it really said a lot. He tried really hard, and it was only finally at some point when he finally realized that everyone was abandoning him. There was nobody supporting him at all. And he in rehab, he said, this was his last chance. And he looked at his life, and he finally started to pull himself out. But you know how we can do that? We can make these little choices. We start, one of them for me is sometimes I like to listen to the news. Not really an uplifting choice sometimes, especially now. And so I'll listen to the news a little bit, and then I'll realize, I'm not feeling so good. And then I turn on, a usually I turn on, it's a chanting tape, or I'll turn on the Swami song tape and I'll sing for a while. What a difference in my mood, what a difference in how I feel. So if I kept choosing that others, I would be going down and down. But I've got to stop choosing it, period. And so that I can continue on the other path. So I just challenge you to think of your own life. We know that gravity exists. It's a reality, but we don't go climb up a big tall building and jump off just to test it to see if it's really true. So this conscious reality of Satan exists. It's true. The masters tell us we can see it in our own lives and probably in the lives of others. And so, don't tempt. Just as the song said this morning, you don't want to tempt the devil and do these little things. Well, a little bit of this won't hurt, a little bit of that won't hurt, because it does hurt. It really hurts, especially if you keep on it, because it will keep pulling you down. Just think a little choice isn't going to make a difference, but after a while it does. So I think to leave you with a thought of the most important thing we can be is to be conscious of our choices and everything we do, everything we say, everything we think. And that's not easy to do. So whatever it takes to get you into that self, because we are children of the light, we are meant to go home. It is our reality. And so many people here are. You just shine with that light. But you're not safe until you get there. And the masters tell us that. So just keep at it. Just a little bit longer. Master said, on the spiritual path, 25% of the spiritual path is your effort. If you think of it like as a pie chart, 25% is your effort. 25% is the effort of the guru for you. And 50% is God's grace. And so God is pulling for us, and yet He gave us this test, the delusion too. And He gave that delusion free choice, just like He gave us free choice. And so it's up to us to make those choices to come home. And then God and the force will pull us back to Him. And it's inevitable, it's going to happen. But the more we cooperate with it, the faster it's going to happen for us. So one of the greatest things we can do, that greatest resistance we can put up for that pull, that downward pull, because it's the energy pulling us downward, as we know, is to create devotion in our hearts. Devotion for the divine. And I know you hear about that all the time here, but whatever it takes to just start to bring that sense of God is the doer. God is always here with us. We're just this channel. And just love what it is, that flow that's flowing through you. Whether, whatever you do, just use that as your opportunity to be that channel for God. Whether you do it through music, or through gardening, or through technology, which I don't understand, but I know people can do it that way. Whatever is your thing, working with children, or just become that channel of light for God, so that you can make those choices and go in that direction that will take you home to God. Just like we say at Sunday service every day, or every time at Sunday, that we choose the light, we choose your love. Just do that. Choose God's love all the time. So let's think about it. Thank you.
I'd like to read a poem from Yogananda's Whispers from Eternity. I want to use my own will, but guide it ever, Father, toward the golden paradise of all fulfillment. For I would be infinity's smiling child, confident of being imprisoned no longer behind the bars of fruitless desires and withered hopes. I would break the shameful cords of lethargy that have presumed to hold me and step fearlessly into freedom. Realized, I now blaze my way through the forest of every limitation and illusion. Oh, my little vain ego may strut proudly, saying, "Behold my glory, worship me." But I will look through its transparent form and behold thine unimaginable beauty, clothed in the subtle form of the whole universe. The silence-tuned hearing of my soul will ignore the tiny boasting masquerader, my little self-impersonating thee. I will listen rapturously to the wind-born fragrant music of thine own matchless voice, whispering across the ages, I am he.